When I was fired, I was concerned about finances, and the first thing I did was jump right into consulting work. As I got into that, which I did immediately, it and given my age, which at that time was now 64, 65, this is not the way I want to exit the stage. Be this is not how I want to be remembered. I've never been happier at my work than I have since I launched this business. Nothing I've done in my career has given me as much reward, joy, challenge too, as this. I don't think I would have appreciated what I have right now if I had done this as a 20-something, right out of the gate, started up a business with a couple of friends or something. I don't think I'd have nearly the same appreciation for it as I do now. So in a sense, it came at a perfect time in my life to give me an opportunity to contrast it with everything that came before it. And it's just so much more rewarding.
This is a ProBoomer Boomcast. Information, inspiration, insight, and advice from successful thought leaders to help you launch yourself and assure the years ahead are some of your best.
How I Became an Entrepreneur at age 66. That's the name of Paul Tasner's TED Talk. 2.2 million views of that TED Talk. And for good reason, all of that interest, because so many boomers are or have been becoming entrepreneurs. In fact, boomers lead millennials by a 2-to-1 margin in the number of startups and have a 7 in 10 chance of success. Why? Well, networks and experience, among other things. But why the interest? Well, like Paul, a lot of people want something more. View this as my turn, or need income but can't get a job because of ageism. For whatever the reason, it's a mega trend and it's going to continue. And also the type of entrepreneurialism that Paul pursued, which is social entrepreneurialism. In other words, a business that makes a difference. So it's an incredible TED Talk. I recommend that you watch it. But in our interview, we're able to go much deeper into his story. Are you happy you did this?
Unquestionably happy I did this. I could give you the longer answer, but
go for it.
Absolutely. The work I do, I've never been happier at my work than I have since I launched this business. Nothing I've done in my career has given me as much reward, joy, challenge too, as this. And I've had good jobs. I've had several quote good jobs over the course of my career, but not even close, really.
So what is it about it? I mean, because certainly, we know either directly or by common sense that starting up a business is hard, and it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of unknowns and risk and things of that sort. So what makes you so glad that you went through all of that when you could have been in glorious retirement, traditional retirement?
I don't play golf, so we can take that off. Take that off. Right? As I said earlier, I've had good jobs, but they've always been jobs. I will say I don't think I would have appreciated what I have right now if I had done this as a 20-something, right out of the gate, started up a business with a couple of friends or something. I don't think I'd have nearly the same appreciation for it as I do now. So in a sense, it came at a perfect time in my life to give me an opportunity to contrast it with everything that came before it. And it's just so much more rewarding. Yes, it's tedious and hard and full of pitfalls and but it's all yours. I mean, you can go as fast or as slow as you want. The victories are all yours. The defeats are all yours. There's just such a sense of um, pride, really pride. I mean,
How so? Yeah, how so? Pride.
um, my granddaughter thinks I'm cool. I think she's very cool also. I mean, she's 15, but just it's everyone knows how hard it, not everyone, but I mean, certainly those who have done it know how hard it is. And those who haven't probably have irrational fears about how hard it is. So the sense that I've done it, it just gives me a great sense of pride. Um, I know how hard it has been and still is, but it, it it just feels like such it feels like such an accomplishment compared to landing a job. It just feels like so much more of an accomplishment than that. And as I said, I think it's in my case, it's so important that I've done it at this stage of my life. It really gives me a chance to savor it in comparison to everything else that I've done. I wouldn't have nearly the same appreciation for it if I'd done this at 20 or 30 or 40. I don't think I would.
What kind of a difference do you think it's made in your life? That, in other words, contrasting this situation that you're in today, now 9 years later, so over the past 9 years, as compared to what your life would have been like if you had followed some sort of traditional retirement, just not working anymore. Can you imagine that?
No, I can't. It is hard to imagine it, especially now 9 years into this. Um, I I think something else would have happened. I mean, I don't know what it would have looked like, but something else would have happened. As I said, facetiously, I'm not a golfer. I just can't see myself in a. I don't I don't feel like the kind of guy who would have had a traditional retirement. It just doesn't seem to suit me.
And,
So
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't know what it would have looked like if it wasn't this. It would have been something like this. I don't know what that means, but it would have been something, meaning it would have been something that I poured myself into and got a great deal of satisfaction from. And, who knows what that would have been. Maybe something in the not-for-profit world, or something where I would have felt a great sense of accomplishment or pride, as I said.
Because obviously that must be important to you. And in fact, let's even go back to a little over 9 years ago, when the company where you were working with bid you adieu suddenly, but not totally unexpectedly, as you conveyed to me.
Right.
What drove you to make this decision, to make this determination that I was going to start something up?
I there was no aha moment. There really wasn't. I've heard other people say that too. Like, people ask, when did you have the aha moment? Not too many people have it. I think it's something that kind of washes over you slowly, or that's the impression I got from speaking with others about it. Not a huge survey, but it wasn't for me. It was not an aha moment. When I was fired, I was concerned about finances, and the first thing I did was jump right into consulting work, which I had done much earlier in my life. Out of a sense of panic, or out of a sense of needing to keep the cash flowing. And I think as I got into that, which I did immediately, and given my age, which at that time was now, 64, 65, this is not the way I want to exit the stage. Being, this is not how I want to be remembered. And it really became an urgency then, because I was 64 years old. This could have easily been my last act. And so I began to think about what I could do. And fortunately, I had the luxury of thinking about that while I was doing consulting work. So I didn't have to, as one might do with a traditional career, I didn't have to stop doing something to start doing something else. Although I believe nowadays people's transitions are a lot smoother than that. They start thinking about something while they're still doing something.
Ideally, but surprisingly not many. So
yes.
Maybe this is helping some of those people. Yeah.
So I began to think, what could I do? I think I always felt I would stick close to my knitting, as they say, in the world of manufacturing or packaging and consumer products or things of that sort. Interestingly, a former colleague of mine who had the entrepreneurial spirit much earlier than I did had started his own business in Asia. And knowing that I was now available, reached out to me and asked if I wanted to be his North American sales manager. And I thought, I considered it, but first of all, I'm a dreadful salesman, so I didn't want to do that to him. But it was in an area that intrigued me. The work that he was doing intrigued me in terms of the environment and packaging for consumer goods. And I turned him down gracefully, but I said, well, what about this? What if I start a business like yours, but here in North America, and you manufacture my goods for me there in China? He was in China. Because I knew him and I trusted him, and he would have been a wonderful partner, I thought. I knew there weren't a lot of folks in North America that did what he did. And I didn't even test them out because they were large companies, and I doubted if they wanted to team up with somebody like me just starting out. And he said, that's no different than you being my North American sales manager. I'll still be enjoying the fruits of your labor. Let's do it. And that's kind of how I got into it, through him. We started off very slow. He actually dropped out of the picture a few years later. His business just wasn't growing the way he had hoped, and he moved into some other endeavors. But I found other partners through him and through my own work, and those are my partners today, actually. And two of my partners did something remarkable for anyone, but certainly remarkable for anyone listening who has preconceived notions about what it's like doing business in Asia. Two of my partners said to me, granted they knew me, so there was that trust factor. We know you're just getting started. You can pay us after you get paid. And that's
a difference maker.
That's rare. I mean, if not, unicornish, and made all the difference in the world. And it also made us partners for life. I mean, my loyalty to them will extend, infinitely. And they are my partners today, along with a few other manufacturers around the world. But they're the primary partners that we have. And that's kind of how it got started. So it was, one event led to another, which led to another. And all of a sudden, I've got some customers, and I've got some manufacturing partners and designers, et cetera, and the business was off. And it's admittedly been growing slowly right from the get-go. Never took off like a flash. We've got some big customers, but big in name only. The projects are very modest. But it's nice to be able to bragging rights, we're doing business with Google or somebody. That always helps. But it's never taken off. And I think owing to a number of factors. One, I touched on earlier, I'm a dreadful salesman. I'm laughing, but I think it's true. I'm not a closer, as they say. I keep my consulting hat on too long. And the other is that corporate America, or now we have customers in Europe as well, but the corporate world is slow to embrace sustainability, especially when it's going to cost them another penny or two per package. And usually the difference is that small, but that's not small when you're selling 1 billion packages. So they've been slow to embrace it, but it is getting better. It gets better month after month, constantly getting better. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if it hasn't gotten better and better and better. Companies that wouldn't take our calls now call us. So, I mean, it doesn't always result in a project, but it's definitely better, and it will continue to improve. I know that for a fact.
I want to also go into to progress it and to give some people some insight of what to expect, or can I do something like this? But before we do, describe your business.
Sure.
What is it?
I realized we jumped into chapter 2 without getting.
No, and that's okay. And that's okay.
Well, I touched on some of the cornerstones of it. We design and manufacture packaging for all manner of companies. I said consumer products, but we don't turn down very much in our business. So it's gone beyond consumer products. There's a lot of outliers, probably more outliers than inliers, but basically consumer goods was our intent. Electronics, personal care, cosmetics, premium food products, usually a little higher end kind of a product, a product that can stand to pay another penny or two for their packaging without freaking out. So where we have our problem is with the really low, popularly priced goods that you find hanging on hooks at Walgreens or something like that, selling for $3.95. They can't afford more than 4 cents for their package. So ours tend to have a higher price point. But gosh, we've done packaging for pizza boxes. We did digital gas meters for the Republic of Tunisia.
But the differentiator, but you're more than just a packing company. In other words, you're doing more than just supplying packaging. What is your differentiator in terms of it's what?
It's eco-friendly packaging. It's packaging created from waste. We use waste, agricultural waste. It's all based on cellulosic fibers, the fibers in paper and paper goods and in plants. And in fact, paper and sugarcane are our 2 primary raw materials. When they extract the juice from the sugarcane plant, they're left with this fibrous mess.
Stover, right?
Bagasse, but yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Bagasse is the industry name for it in our industry. And it creates beautiful packaging. It's certainly more expensive than paper waste, but it does create really premium packaging. So a lot of our potential clients like the look. Those are our 2 primary raw materials, but we could use bamboo, we could use the hulls on rice kernels, anything that's got a fiber in it. Wheat straw is a popular fiber for our kind of packaging. We don't use it, but it's popular among other companies. So yes, we create packaging from waste fiber, cellulosic fiber. That's the essence.
And what drove you in that direction to offer that approach?
That has always been in the marketplace, but never it was always kind of a commodity behind the scenes, nothing very sexy at all. Egg cartons are a prime example of the molded fiber packaging, the kind of work we do. But it's sort of the granddaddy of them, and the earliest and most unattractive form. But it's very utilitarian. The egg carton's been around for decades. But that's the kind of packaging that we do. The tray that you take your coffee drinks out on has usually got 4 slots for your cups. That's molded fiber packaging. And then you compare that to the kinds of things we do. It's a whole different world, but it's the same technology, though.
Well,
Oh,
so so doing it this way can certainly make you, in business terms, it's a differentiator, because people can promote the fact that we're using, a more sustainable, eco-friendly
correct.
packaging and such. But that does make you a social entrepreneur, of which there's a major trend, and especially with people over 50, where you're doing a business to try to make a positive impact or difference or solve a
Correct.
problem. So how important was that in
Very.
the scheme of things of your life, of what your intention was and what you wanted to do and the impact you wanted to make, so on and so forth? How important was it that you did something in that social entrepreneurial vein?
Very. That was one of the major boxes I needed to check off. I had to feel good about what I was doing, and you're right. I mean, I should add to the profile of our business. Our intent was to replace plastic packaging, not all plastic packaging, obviously, but the unnecessary plastic packaging. Not everything has to be encased in plastic. Yes, it'd be kind of tough to sell you a bottle of milk that wasn't in a plastic container or glass, but so many other things do not need to be encased in plastic, and that was our intent, to replace plastic packaging. And most of the business that comes our way is because a company does want to replace their plastic packaging. They've grown tired of it. I just had a chat with a food service company in New Orleans. They provide ready to eat meals for companies, and it's just wonderful listening to the fellow, the founder, talk about how he just hates looking at his packaging. He knows he sends out thousands of these every day, and he sends out thousands of black plastic trays with his food in it. And he said, we take great pains to provide good, healthy meals to our clients, and we put them in these plastic trays. And he said, it's breaking my heart. I don't often hear that from a potential client, but it's beautiful music when you do. So that's the customer that we're looking for. And yes, being a social entrepreneur, as you said, it was really important. And I did get to check that box off, and it makes me feel good.
And God forbid we don't feel good about what we're doing. So, I mean, congratulations. Going back to the beginning, I mean, you said you were not the entrepreneurial type, and you had a very successful corporate career. And obviously that gave you many skill sets and such, but not viewing yourself as an entrepreneur in corporate life doesn't necessarily prepare you for being an entrepreneur. I mean, how was that early going, given that? I mean, how prepared were you? And I especially think of somebody watching this who's like, I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't know how to be an entrepreneur. That's somebody
Right.
else. How much did that prepare you? How hard was that to uplearn and be able to do it?
That's a great question. In the way that many people would gauge their success in the corporate world, I did not have a successful corporate career. Yes, I was a solid resident of middle management, maybe upper middle management on some occasions, but I never broke through to the boardroom or anything like that. And it became apparent to me early in my career that I never would. But I saw what it took, and I wasn't like those people. I was going to say I wasn't like those guys, because most of the time it was those guys. Certainly, 40 years ago it was. It did. when I started out in a corporate job, I did have aspirations of running the company someday. I was what's is the word, disabused of that pretty quickly.
Youth. Yeah.
I just didn't have, and this is actually a compliment. I just didn't have what it took. I didn't want what it took. I saw those people that were scratching their way to the top. I wasn't like them and didn't want to be like them. I was fortunate. I've always had manufacturing related jobs, and I was fortunate that many of my jobs were outwardly focused, meaning they weren't internal manufacturing roles. There were roles in which my employer outsourced their manufacturing, and I was responsible for all of that work. So I got to face outward. I got to face the real world, so to speak, rather than the internal world where everything revolved around the corporation itself. And this world was populated by entrepreneurs, and I was really drawn to them. They were charismatic, they were clever, they were successful. I liked them. I liked their company. I liked their style. But I wasn't learning from them. I mean, I was just admiring them. I don't think, I wouldn't have called any of them mentors in a way. So was I prepared to be, for what it took? I wasn't prepared in any formal sense, that's for sure. But I was prepared to do what it took. And no matter how tedious, and I must say, most of the work I do is rather tedious. It's not all sexy and strategy based, and it's tedious. Or as a gentleman said to me once, I was on a panel. I can't even remember what the subject of the panel was, but it wasn't a virtual panel. It was a real panel. And the gentleman next to me, it was about, I think it was about senior entrepreneurship. The fellow next to me was an attorney who got into the music business somehow, and he was based in Florida, Miami. And I forget what we were talking about, but it was a kind of a nuts and bolts panel about senior entrepreneurship. He was quite successful music. I mean, some of his recording artists were names we knew. And I think we were talking about finances. He kind of leaned over to grab my ear so nobody else would hear. And it was the last thing I ever expected out of his mouth. And he said to me, "God, I just love sending out invoices."
Which is kind of what it's all about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I definitely could relate to that, but that's the last thing I expected out of his mouth.
What did it take? I mean, what was it? So you didn't have an entrepreneurial mindset per se. You didn't certainly have any entrepreneurial experience. What was it like for you actually doing it? And I say this in kind of a gut check for people who are thinking about it or going, this isn't for me. So I imagine there's some positive things for you to say, but I mean, it must be scary. It must be daunting. It must be, why am I doing this? Who am I kidding? Did that happen? I mean, what was it like?
I've had those reactions, at times. I mean, they're by no means make up the majority of my inward thoughts, not at all. But I can like everyone, I guess, I can get into a funk about something if several things go wrong in a row or something like that. But it's the exception to my to my attitude about the business. The amount of I use the word tedious, but I mean I've never found it tedious in the way I've found doing other things, in the corporate world, tedious. There are so many details, and I mean really small details that one has to you're faced with them every day, just an enormous amount of details, and you've got to do them, get past them, get on to the next one and the next one and the next one. And in between all these details, there are, different opportunities that are a little grander in scope. And so there, it's a real joy to embrace those. And I guess what I'm saying is and I think I am a fairly reflective person. There's not a lot of time to, sort of sit back and question whether this is, question whether this was the right thing to do or something. It's always felt like the right thing to do. I've never really felt like I need to take some time and think about this because it's just not working out. It's never been like that. So I don't want to say that I haven't really thought deeply about what I'm doing. I've been so tied up in the weeds. But I've said this to other people. I am doing a lot of the same things I did when I was in the corporate world. I mean, the non-entrepreneurial things, the more operational things, the more technical things. I'm still involved in manufacturing operations, in logistics, and calculating this or that. And it's very much like what I did in the corporate world. But it's the other parts, the part that make it an entrepreneurial venture, securing a customer, and doing all of the administrative things that one needs to do in order to keep a company floating and progressing. That's different, of course. I never was involved in that. And that's just a learning. That's, I mean, I don't want to minimize it, but you just find out what you need to do, or you make a mistake and you correct it. And, but I have said so many times that I think because the work itself is not so different than what I did, but it feels like worlds apart because it's my work now. I'm not doing it for the man. I'm doing it for me. And that makes all the difference in the world. And I've said this on other interviews, I've said this, that, people wonder about what they should do in retirement. They don't want to retire. And I've maintained that why not consider, unless you're just done with accounting, you know what I mean? But why not consider continuing what you're doing, but doing it for yourself, setting up your own accounting business? You'll derive so much satisfaction from doing it yourself. Or else prove me wrong. But I mean, it worked for me. I'm doing what I did as a corporate person, but it was nowhere near the same kind of satisfaction. Nowhere near. So I think there's a lot of folks out there who in retirement could merely extend what they've done during their careers, but extend it as their own business. Or if you want to be a professional, Zydeco musician, go ahead and do it. But I don't want to stop you. But if you're looking closer to home for something to do, try doing what you've been doing, but set up your own business.
Yeah, it's leveraging the skills and talents and experience that you have, finding other people to fill the gaps of what you don't have, and maybe even parlaying your skills and talents into something completely different, which many corporations are making their people doing anyway, because the way you've been doing it doesn't work anymore. But we'll train you to take those skills and manifest them this way.
Exactly. Especially if you essentially liked what you were doing, but you hated the grind, you hated the meetings, you hated the bosses, but if you liked the work, I mean, if you derive some satisfaction, I mean, whatever whatever compelled you to choose that line of work, when you were 22 or 25, think about that. I mean, you can have that back doing it, on your own.
You did a TED Talk that's had over 2.5 million views for good reason. Not every TED Talk gets those kinds of numbers. So especially,
although I will take issue with you there. Yes, you're right. But the TED platform, my talk
it's huge.
It's huge. The TED platform is huge, and when I was at TED, I'd heard it said many times, you could get on that TED stage, the red dot, and just belch for 15 minutes, and you'll still get 2 million views.
Well, yeah, but by the way, you won't get on, and that's the other validating thing about what you shared in that TED Talk, is that you're not going to get a TED Talk. By the way, not a TEDx Talk, a TED
Correct.
Talk.
Correct.
You're not going to get on that red dot unless you've got something that people need to hear. It's been validated.
Yes.
So encapsulate, if you will, and in the show notes, I'll have a link to it, and it's worth watching. Share your point. What the fundamental intent that you had with that talk that did resonate in so many people viewing it?
Well, I think, first I'll go back just a couple of steps and to talk about what brought me to TED, which was kind of just one of those interesting events in one's life. I was in Mexico in 2015 at a wonderful event. It's a bit like TED. It's sort of Latin American TED in a way, and the organizers it's in Puebla, Mexico. The organizers they like that comparison. I don't know that TED likes the comparison. They don't like. They guard their brand very closely. So, but it is very much like Latin American TED. Although they have people from all over the world. And I met a lovely woman there. We were both participating as competitors, with new businesses, which I won, by the way.
Congratulations.
It was wonderful. And she was the runner-up. And we became pals. And she was from India, and she had a wonderful business catering to remote villages and helping them with their medical needs, etc. And she said to me, my kits, these medical kits that I provide throughout remote India, are plastic. Do you think I could get those made out of your sugarcane waste? And I said, absolutely. Long story short, she became my customer, and a good one. And I was on the phone with her one day about something very detailed, just a load that was held up in customs. And she said, I've got to jump off, but call me back. I'm 3 hours ahead of you. And I said, well, where are you? Because India is 12 and a half hours.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm in New York. And I said, oh, that's great. What are you doing there? I'm at TED. And I thought, TED who? What do you mean? She said, TED, like TED Talks. I'm going to be giving a TED Talk. I'm a TED resident. And she explained to me what that was. And I said, that's fantastic. And then she paused and she said, you should apply. Really? And she said, yeah, I think what you're doing would be really fascinating to these folks. Why don't you apply? And I did, and I was accepted. And it's a fascinating program. It operates twice a year. It's called the TED Resident Program. 2 times a year, they invite 25 or so people from all over the world to come to New York to TED headquarters. And we spend 4 months there together. There's a section of the building reserved for us. It's an open office area where 24 people have their spaces, because everyone has a life there. Everyone can't put their life on hold. So they have to continue doing what they're doing. Hopefully they can do it successfully from a remote location. And there are no rules except keep doing what you're doing, of course. We don't want your life to suffer as a result of this. Collaborate with each other wherever you can, and give a TED Talk 4 months from now on a subject that, is compelling. And there are numbers of people from the TED organization who worked with us and helped us. And I felt kind of fortunate. I already had an idea in mind what I wanted to talk about. As I started to think of the practical, oh my God, I've got to give a TED Talk in 4 months. I had a pretty decent idea that I wanted to talk about the environment. I wanted to talk about entrepreneurism, which I was a new member. And I wanted to talk about ageism, which I was experiencing. And the directors of the program said, phenomenal. It's like the perfect wave. We'll fashion your speech, or you'll fashion your speech to talk about all of these things, because they all connect. In you, they all connect. So no one better to talk about them than you. And that's how my talk developed.
And so the talk essentially said, I mean, again, I'm going to have to link it to it so people can watch the whole thing, but what was your point? What were you hoping to do with it?
I think, well, I certainly wanted to convey the difficulties in starting up a business. I certainly wanted to point out the environmental crisis we were having because of the plastic pollution. And I very much wanted to underscore the ageism in the marketplace, whether you're an entrepreneur or just someone working for the man. And I think that sort of took over. If you had to rate those pillars of my talk, I think the ageism just kind of took over the number one spot. At least it did for me emotionally. I think it was a more emotionally charged pillar of my talk than the environmental issues or the entrepreneurial issues. And I think probably because I was experiencing it.
And what I took from it, what really hit me, I mean, I heard all of those things, was the encouragement. I mean, to me, I got a lot of encouragement out of that talk. That
yes.
About this time, as you touched on earlier, this time of life, and there are so many people succeeding of it, which is a validation for the fact that this is a great time of life, great time of your life, to be able to accomplish and also benefit personally from doing something like this.
Right. Yes, I didn't mean to be a Debbie Downer about.
Yeah, please, come on, Paul.
No, you're right. I did want to be encouraging, and most of the, I mean, to this date, I've not gotten a negative response to my talk. From the people that send you notes, and I've gotten hundreds, probably thousands of notes. They're all wonderfully, complimentary. I mean, you've inspired me. You made my day. You made my week. You changed my life. I mean, they're really humbling notes, and inspiring seems to be one of the major themes. And I can't tell you how phenomenal that makes me feel. It's just, I mean, hear someone tell you that you inspired them. I mean, even if my kids said that to me, I'd be on cloud nine, for the rest of my life. But to hear it from strangers and hear it over and over again, it's an unbelievable feeling.
So thinking of someone watching this who, again, is thinking about it, or maybe hasn't thought about it or doesn't view themselves of it. Again, I think watching your TED Talk is inspirational. And you also go into the facts and the numbers. I mean, as I've been touting the Kaufman Index, saying that boomers lead millennials in the number of startups in the United States every year by a 2-to-1 margin. And as you call out, CMI in the UK said that there was a 70% success rate.
Yes.
Whereas millennials have a 28% success
Yes.
rate. Wow. I mean, so what would you say to that person who's maybe just starting to warm up to the idea, might be still going, who am I? That's things that other people do. You know, I'm no Steve Jobs. You know, what would you say to them?
I'd say just that, just what you said, Paul. You've got a 7 out of 10 chance of being successful going into this. I mean, those are damn good odds.
In business, that is well above the norm for almost any kind of success.
Absolutely, because you're experienced. You probably are a little more risk averse than Mr. 20-something, because he or she knows that if this fails, I'll just get back on my horse and start another business, next week. You don't have that many startups left in you when you're, 66 or 76. So you're probably more risk averse. You're going to think it through a lot harder and longer. And you got a 7 in 10 chance of being successful. That's probably hard for someone to believe sitting here today wondering, what am I going to do? I'd really like to do something. And I know that is a hard thing to take in, but the numbers don't lie. The chances are, when you've gone through this process and thought about what you're going to do and gotten into it, 7 out of 10 times you're going to be successful. Wow. I mean, if you can really put your faith in that stat, and it's an honest to goodness statistic, that's exciting.
And I've also heard too that, and from very notable, well-grounded sources, that although it's mostly anecdotal or trend-based, is that there are a lot of people over 50 who are becoming entrepreneurs because they have to, because of the ageism thing, or they can't find a job. And you have to wonder that, given this coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic situation, and we're in the recording of this, we're in the midst of all the lockdown, but that the economy and jobs and business and how people are going to earn income and how companies are going to hire workplace is going to be radically different. Meaning, it could be a real challenge to keep or find what we're now going to say is traditional employment. That may be radically different forever after we're done with this. But the second thing too is that there is a fundamental premise that with change, with a problem, with a crisis, there are needs, and therefore where there's a need, there's an opportunity,
right,
on a small scale and on a giant scale. So it would seem like this may be a critical option for you, your life and income, as well as an opportunity to solve a problem that we're going to have.
Exactly. I think for those contemplating, or maybe, as you just said, maybe contemplating entrepreneurism now, whereas never before did they embrace it in this fashion. I think it feels funny saying this in the midst of this crisis, but I think the future looks rosy for them because, again, as you pointed out, it's going to be vastly different in a way that resembles more like what we're doing during the crisis, and working from home. I mean, many companies are going to discover, much to their surprise, I'm not sure why it should be surprising, that they can survive very nicely. Yes, they can't manufacture their products at home, but they can sure as heck manage the business, remotely and successfully in many ways. So the workplace is going to look quite different. And, what's the next step to managing successfully from home is managing successfully, from someone who's an outsourced expert at it.
And I like that. I mean, that is a huge success factor. You've even touched on it that, no one's good at everything. And so you do an honest self-assessment. I call it a gap analysis. I know technically that applies to something else, but it's like, what am I good at and what am I not good at? And when I'm not good at it, you can hire somebody else to fill that gap that's better at it, or something that I'm just don't want to do.
Right.
I'm not the numbers guy, so I want somebody else to do that because I'm going to fail at it.
Exactly.
So on back to the personal basis,
yes,
where you've kind of found yourself now after 9 years of it. I want you to share the story and then talk about it from a personal standpoint. You told me the story about a couple of researchers at a big insurance company that called you, and not so much the backstory, but what was the bottom line of what they said to you about what you're doing?
They were among the people that reached out to me after my TED talk. They must comb the annals of TED for insurance-related stories or something. They were from Aegon, Aegon, and it's a worldwide life insurance company based in the Netherlands called Transamerica here in the States. They said that did I recognize that what I was doing was the absolute best thing you could do to extend your life. And I thought about it, in fact, I thought about it while I was talking to them. Of course, they would love anything that extends your life because they get to keep your money longer.
But that's also what an insurance company does. They are researching trends and how can we keep our customers alive to help our actuarial table.
Bless their hearts. They just want us to live forever. So they never have to pay out a benefit. Sorry, Aegon.
Well, do you feel that way? I mean, like, how do you feel when you get up in the morning, and especially now compared to your corporate days?
No comparison. No comparison. And just to finish what they said, that having something compelling to do in your senior years, and they were quick to point out that does not include golf, and a lot of other but that's not a compelling thing to do. That's it's a good exercise, yes, and it's good socialization. But to have something compelling to dive into every day, it's just an enormous boost to longevity.
Well, it keeps you relevant.
Acuity.
You have challenges, which means you have successes. You have contrast in life,
Exactly.
You think, oh, I'll be able to sleep late, and then you're able to do it for a little while, and then all of a sudden it's like, and now it's depressing to sleep late.
Exactly.
You have to have that. So
yes, it's there's no comparison. I think you and I talked about it. I can't wait to get up in the morning and look in my inbox and see what's in there and what new business has come our way. Or whereas in my previous life, I used to pray that my inbox was empty.
That's a great analogy. Can I use that? I like that.
Yes, absolutely.
What so two final questions. One, so if I'm on the fence of it, or maybe I thought, well, who am I to do that? But you've warmed me up. What would you say to me? If we're having a cup of coffee going, Paul, I just don't know if I'm right for this, but I feel like I need something in my life. What would you say to me?
I would encourage you to try it. I will encourage anyone who'll give me an opening, if they're even vaguely considering this. I would do my best to sell them on giving it a try. Because if they're successful, and 7 out of 10 times they will be, they'll look back on this as the best time of their life.
Wow.
If they've spent the previous 40 years in a corporate job, they'll look at this as the best time, certainly the best time in their professional lives. And that's another interesting issue here. Separating when you go off and punch the clock for somebody, your personal and professional lives are pretty separate. And in some cases, much to your detriment. Um, Families that grow up without a parent because he or she just couldn't turn it off. And especially at my age and in my circumstances, we do have an office. We have a shared space, as so many people have these days, but we don't use it very often. We don't use it for meetings with a client, and most of our clients are not local, so it's rarely something we need to do. Most of my work is from home, and my professional life and my personal life are completely intertwined. If there's a movie that just came out that my wife and I are dying to see, we'll go off and see it in the afternoon, before the theaters are crowded or something like that. I just feel I'm constantly doing personal things during the course of my day, texting my daughter, talking to my son, or wrapping a gift, or whatever it is. My day is filled with personal endeavors as well as my work. And my work can take place anytime during the day. I mean, some things you have to respond to right away, of course, but we have some customers in Europe and we have partners in Asia, so it feels like I'm on a 24-hour clock. I'll be answering a message in bed at night at midnight because it's 3 p.m. in Hong Kong. My life, personally and professionally, are a mosaic of some sorts, and that's not something that I was used to in the corporate world. You had this and you had that, and this works so much better. And that can be if you set it up that way, that's how it can be for you.
What kind of impact are you hoping you're having?
Well, my kids are grown and they have careers of their own. I mean, I guess, but none of them, they could all drop what they're doing and do something entrepreneurial. None of them are entrepreneurs, but at least they have some role model of what it's like to embrace the entrepreneurial spirit even later in life. So I say that because I hope I'm setting a good example for my grandchildren who haven't become entrepreneurs yet. I don't know what they haven't, but they'll always remember, even after I'm gone, they'll always remember what it was like for Poppy, as an entrepreneur, and hopefully have a good impression of that. And just from my work, my TED Talk will live long after me. Inspiring people to embrace entrepreneurism and hopefully embrace an endeavor that doesn't further erode our society or our planet. It's not just enough to be an entrepreneur. I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there who are doing some pretty nasty things as entrepreneurs. That's not the legacy you want to leave. I hope I'm setting the kind of example that I would have liked set for me, for others.
And that's a good roadmap to follow. Paul, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Paul. Thank you.
In that interview, I still go back to what he said at the beginning, that this has been one of the most fulfilling and rewarding parts of his life, and he doesn't think he could have enjoyed it and gotten all of it that he did if it had happened earlier in his age. And this is what I'm hearing from other baby boomer or people over 50 who have started up their own business. And so if this interests you, if you're already thinking about it or you still want to explore it more, on ProBoomer we have a lot more content, a lot more interviews with entrepreneurial experts such as Wendy Mayhew and Stuart Nelson and Beth Bond, especially on the topic of social entrepreneurialism. And also we want to hear your story, your path, what you're thinking about, or what else ProBoomer can supply to you. And while you're on the site, do us a favor, do yourself a favor, and please subscribe for free. Click the subscription button, and we will keep you updated on topics such as these as we roll them out.